Well, good morning. No doubt it's a late night for some of you last night. I'm probably talking for the speakers, actually, more than anything. Well, good morning. My name's Heseltine. Can you hear me at the back okay? All right, let's just have a show of hands that's never heard me speak before. Oh, well, that's a few more victims then. Okay. All right, well, I'm a police officer, serving officer for 21 years. I've been a detective constable for 16 years. All right, I've worked on all manner of inquiries, murder, manslaughter, rape, and I'm an advanced interviewer for both suspects and witnesses. I am also an accredited investigator of serious and complex crime. So, in a sense, when I talk about UFOs, I talk about it from a slightly different perspective. i.e., if I don't know what evidence is, I should be locked up. I should know what evidence is. So I tend to look at the subject through police eyes, and from my point of view, there is overwhelming evidence to say that a proportion of sightings of UFOs are indeed extraterrestrial in origin, because what else could they be? Their flight characteristics, which I will go into a little bit later, which are apparent and also necessary when we look at police sightings. What else could they be? Because we don't have the technology to match the performance of many of the sightings witnessed by police officers, public, military, etc. alike. Okay, my interest in the subject began when I was 15 years old, when I had a sighting in my hometown of Scunthorpe, or actually the suburb of Ashby in Scunthorpe, when I was walking my then girlfriend home, and as we passed along a narrow footpath beside my comprehensive school and a large allotment, we saw on a balmy August summer's night a bright white light just moving about a 60-degree angle across our path, very slowly, much bigger than the background stars, not a cloud in the sky. And as we watched, there were houses in the distance. As soon as the object went past our path, and therefore we were behind its flight path, the whole area in the distance behind the flight path was plunged into darkness. Power cut. Rightly or wrongly, the girl that I was with associated that object with causing the power cut and was instantly and visibly frightened. We watched. There was a further series of housing, and as it went further along, very slowly, no noise whatsoever, second power cut. I had my cycle with me at the time, so I said, right, get on the bike, I'm going to rush you to your house, which wasn't far from the end of the alleyway, and I'm going to see if I can take a shortcut, which is what I did. Dropped her off, her house is in darkness, got on the bike, pedalled like mad, took a shortcut. Cutting a long story short, I ended up actually riding and going from darkness into the street light and the power on in the distance. And as I rounded a bend near to my home, I had this surreal experience where I'm going from darkness, power cut, into light. The object is now slightly behind me, therefore I'm in front of it, not the other way around. It's over my right shoulder, I go around two corners, drop the bike outside my house, I run in, it must be about 8 or 9 o'clock, my parents are having a cup of tea, supper, and I say, come outside, I think there's going to be a power cut. They go, why? And I say, because there's this light. Come outside and they go, what? As you would. They don't follow me out. I rush out through the hole, through the kitchen, out the back door, look back at the house, see the object coming over my rooftop. I put my arm up. No sooner did it go past the 90 degrees, and guess what? Power cut. I ain't a scientist, but the odds of calculating that I could predict a power cut must be pretty high. So it's at that point there, from a second geographical position, that I realised that that object must have had some kind of interaction with the power grid. So there's my interest. Okay, just as another straw poll, stick your hand up if you've ever had a UFO experience. Okay, that's probably about half in the room. And that's generally what brings people into this subject. And you can even get the most arch skeptics who will say, what a load of rubbish, you're all rubbish, it's absolute crap. But when they have a sighting, they'll go, if you'd have said to me that I had seen what I saw, but I know what I saw. And it's a classic phrase, I know what I saw. So when you have that kind of experience, it stays with you. For me, it's a long, circuitous route before I actually became to the point of investigating. I'd followed the subject from afar. It's got magazines. At one point I joined Bufora as a teenager, associate member, never did any research, read all the books at that time, then drifted away from the subject for a long, long time. And it wasn't really until the mid-1990s, by which time I was a police officer, that I accidentally came across a copy of UFO magazine here in Leeds, because I work in Leeds, and talk about synchronicity here. But anyway, Graham Birdsall's magazine, I found it on the high street, W.H. Smith's, on the station, railway station. Sure enough, see this magazine. I'd been away from the subject for about 18 years. Wow, this looks nice, glossy. Liked the presentation, liked the fact that it was scientifically put, it wasn't sensationalistic. It was very pro-UFO as ET, but it was written very well and it was done very sensibly. I was now always looking at the subject through police eyes because I look at evidence every day. So that's when I looked at the pilots, the astronauts, the cosmonauts, the radar operators, the observer corps, military witnesses, scientists, physicists. There was such an overwhelming amount of data that said that this is a real phenomenon if you know where to look. Unfortunately, we can go and spend another 6 hours talking about the way the media present it, and that's not what I'm here. Okay, so that's basically a rundown of why, in a few minutes, I'm here now. And if somebody had said to me that, Gary, 12 years ago, if somebody said to me, Gary, you're going to speak in Washington at the Washington Press Club at the same platform as Nelson Mandela, I'd have laughed at them. But that's what happened in me. And it's a strange journey, and for many of the people who are involved in researchers, something happens to them. And along the way, something grabs you, and maybe I can quote Richard Dolan, complete skeptic, complete different to me because I'd had an experience. He went into it as a complete skeptic, but he's a sensible man, and he looked at the evidence and he's thinking there's something wrong here because there is that much evidential material, but in the media this is just poo-pooed. We're all Looney Tunes, okay? So, it has a habit of pulling you in, this subject, and once you're in, I don't think you escape it because I think it's under your skin. And this is now the all-pervading theme of my life. I'm still a serving police officer. It's difficult over and above my work at times. And I would have to say that now, having had no interference for 8 years, I can say that I can't tell you which force I belong to, because if I do, I'll get disciplined. I've just got disciplined and I'm on a 12-month written warning, just because I wrote to the chief constables of 38 police forces and said, would you redirect your material from that you're going to get in the future to me, to the Proof Force Police database. And by the way, I am a police officer, so I do know the protocols involved. And because I said which force I belong to, somebody, my chief constable, got a bit of ribbing from another chief constable. And anyway, I ended up going to a misconduct hearing. It's a done deal, you can't beat the system, and I got a 12-month written warning, which I'm still serving. So if there is some sinister plot to get me, they will find a way in the next 12 months to get me. But what can I do? Anyway, but the thing is, you can't put the genie back in a bottle, because when they said, we don't want you to say which force you belong to, I said, well, it's all on the internet. The first 50 pages on Google will tell you from 2002. Ah, well. But anyway, that's the side of it. So things are a little bit more uncomfortable now, but I'm still going to do my work and just try to keep my head down. Okay? Okay, history of British police officer sightings, 1901-2010. Okay, we've done that. Okay, my presentation, slightly different now. We're going to talk about the origin of the database, which I've just done, which is really coming from 2002. Having rediscovered the subject in 1995 with UFO magazine, cutting a long story short, I felt myself being drawn into wanting to get involved. The question was, how could I do it? How do you work as a detective and be part of an organisation? Well, in the end, you can't, and it had to be something that worked around me. What could I research? Well, the best thing that I knew was police officers. I knew about several police cases historically from books, and I thought, there must be literally hundreds of police officers out there over the years, 24 hours a day, who must have seen things. So that's what I'll specialise in. I needed a catchy title, UFOs, Proof Force Police reporting UFOs. So it all sort of went into place. I went to see Graham Birdsall, who was the editor, And this is the synchronicity. It's on my doorstep in Leeds. His head office is in Leeds. What's the chances of that? If it had been in London, I probably wouldn't have bothered. But it's in Leeds, so we talk about synchronicities. Anyway, I went to see him. I said, I've had this idea, and he went, great idea. He wanted anything that promoted the subject in a more scientific way, in a more credible way. So he straight away says, yes, you can write an article for UFO magazine. Massive thrill for me. I'd never written anything in my life. So when that was published, that launched in January 2002. I only have 70 minutes, so I'm talking faster than I would ordinarily do, but this is a 90-minute presentation, so you'll have to bear with me on that. And if I take pause for breath or collapse, you'll know why. Okay. At the end, I'll talk about conclusions, the future of the way I think the subject should go, i.e. ufology, which is maybe a big thing to say, and I'll talk about Rendlesham Forest, which is just ahead of Nick Pope's presentation about Rendlesham and my attempts to try to get this into a film. So I'll update you on that. Okay, as I said earlier, I still am amazed by investigative journalists because, like many of the researchers here, you can be involved in some very prestigious productions, but it really is hard to believe that investigative journalists, you can show this fantastic material, fleets of UFOs in Mexico, hundreds all moving at the same time, when we can only do red arrows with 9 and there's 500 like straight across the cleared skies and things like that, and it still never gets on the news. So we are battling hard to ever get a real platform, but all we can do is try. And eventually I think there will be an event, probably from them, ET, that is a tipping point. High caliber witness categories. For me, anybody who examines the data of pilots alone, just one area that you looked at, if you really looked at pilot reports, military and commercial, especially military pilots, who have had literally millions of pounds stroke dollars spent on their flight training. If you looked at some of the cases that are backed up on radar, multiple radar, ground and airborne radar, multiple aircraft ground and airborne, multiple ground targets, visual targets, it's overwhelming. We're not talking about fleeting ghosts like 5 seconds, 3 second sightings. We're talking hours sometimes, all tracked on radar, all empirical data that can be produced in a court of law. If we had say a big passenger plane crash, yeah, and 50 survivors and the pilot survived, who would be the key person that anybody in an investigation, an aircraft investigation, would want to speak to? The pilot, because he's entrusted with the lives of all of those people. He would be the key witness. But how ironic that when pilots report UFOs, it's here today, gone tomorrow. These people are very special people. We trust them to fly us from London to New York, 350, 400 people. We hand our lives to them because of their skills. And yet we dismiss their very own sightings, often in daylight, often multiple aircraft involved. So, if you ever want to look at books on pilots, if that don't convince you, well, you shouldn't be here. Because I just don't see how you cannot be convinced. Astronauts, cosmonauts. Again, most astronauts, cosmonauts, certainly on in the early space program, were test pilots. The elite, who then graduated on to become astronauts, cosmonauts. If they didn't know what they're looking at, they shouldn't be there. Radar operators. They know what a bit of temperature inversion is. They know if it's an anomalous target. When some of the radar contacts that have been described, not just by police, but by the public and military contacts, they're overwhelming. They know what they're looking at. Many scientists have had sightings and have gone on record. Observer Corps, they're trained at a moment's glance to recognise the object that they're looking at in terms of aircraft recognition. Oh, don't know what that is. We should be listening. And obviously at the end there, I would say police officers. Police officers are not infallible. Nobody is. Pilots are not infallible. But what I'm saying is in the specialist witness categories, the odds of them making mistakes, significant mistakes, are much, much reduced. Whereas everybody talks about the general rule of 95% of everything ever reported as a UFO turns out to be astronomical, meteorological. That's fine. I'm not bothered about the 95%, I'm only bothered about the 5%. And of the 5%, I'm really only bothered about the 3%. The 3% hardcore data, but if you had 1 million, that's a lot. And that we're talking millions of sightings over the years. So, in these high category witness categories, I would argue that a pilot, it's something like 80% know that it's genuine ET. And the odds are that much higher in that group, and a sliding scale. Okay? Not one researcher, unfortunately, can prove this subject here. We can always give a really good account, we can always paint the circumstantial picture, but short of an alien body, then say, there you go, I found it this morning outside my garden, I was going to check it on the 6 o'clock news. And I even think then it would be hard. I think if we actually found a body in your back garden and anybody found out about it, within minutes your house would be surrounded, you'd be cordoned off, it'd be taken off you and you wouldn't get it to the 6 o'clock news. That's probably the reality. What we must do is look at the subject as a whole and paint a circumstantial picture. And that's where I come in, because I know what evidence is, and I know that the circumstantial evidence case is just as strong as having the murderer there and the murder weapon. Many people have been convicted and sent to prison for life without the body ever being found, providing there is enough pieces of the jigsaw that make the whole thing a compelling argument. Yeah? And that's what the circumstantial case is. If you have enough pieces of the jigsaw, you can create this compelling and overwhelming sense that there is something going on. As I said right at the start, I don't mince words. My investigations, I'm now 50, 35 years on after the subject at 15 having a sighting. For me, this is an overwhelming subject. Some UFOs are ET. Now, there are many different facets. There is the spiritual side, the interdimensional side that Richard Dolan talked about. I accept all of that. But what I'm saying is at the heart of it, there is a nuts and bolts side there. Many researchers have veered over the years from the nuts and bolts, and then they've gone off and you know, and they tend to change the views along the way. But I not, because I'm just going to concentrate in these specific areas. And when a pilot says, well, yeah, we flew from London to New York, it was off our wingtip, it flew around us 3 times, it was a silver disc, it was about 30 feet wide, it was on ground radar, airborne radar, I tend to think that's nuts and bolts. And if you don't know what he's talking about, you shouldn't be flying. Okay, origin of the database. It was really created out of a sense of frustration in the way that the media was portraying this subject. And no doubt all of you feel a bit frustrated the way this subject is portrayed in the media. Because even when that clip of Richard Hall asking David Cameron, and it's an excellent clip and I hadn't seen that, he bounced it back with humour as a defence. It's a deflection technique. I'm an advanced interviewer. It's a deflection technique. He wanted breathing time, space to think, what the hell am I going to say? And that's why he's turning his back and he's going, what a fucking question. That's what he was really thinking. Forgive me swearing. There's no kids in the audience. All right, but that's reality. And that humour was a deflection technique to straight away bounce this subject away. Thinking time. It's the only way they can deal with it. Okay, launch 2002. It's there for serving and retired police officers. Because, come up. From my point of view, an off-duty police officer is just the same as an on-duty police officer. The point is he's still got a pair of eyes, he's still had that kind of basic training. Does it matter whether he's on duty in a uniform or civis like me as a detective, Or is he just as valid when he's at home, relaxing with his wife, as often happens, and they see something? To me, just as valid. He's still the police officer. And he will look at the sighting and assimilate it through logical thought processes and record it in a way in his mind that if he had to go to court, he would present it in this logical, chronological order. Because that's what police officers do. Okay, when I initially launched this, my reaction at work, I put it out on our own intranet system, was, there you are, I'm just setting up this database. If you've got any sightings, let me know. And of course, they all came back to me and said, beam me up, Scotty. My inspector's an alien. Nanu, nanu. Take me to your leader. All the usual, really clever ones. So it was a bit of figure of fun, and I expected that, because police, I don't know if there are any police in the audience, but police have a kind of a unique black humour. It's well known. We go to crashes and we make black jokes about people dying, and it's a deflection technique to cope with some of the horrible things that police officers see. But we do have a unique sense of humour. So I expected all that, but within minutes of that happening, oh, not minutes, within 2 weeks of that, I started to get reports from my own officers, and I started to get little stories from when they were in the military and the radar operators and things like that. So the real information started to come through. All right, here's what you want to talk about. 2 new cases, okay? First one, I'll be showing you. The second one is a lot more interesting in terms of physical evidence, because we have some photographs and some video clips which hopefully will play. First case, it's just come to me in the last month or so, March 1982, and this is interesting because there's a definite, if you look at this subject, there's a definite correlation between UFOs and nuclear energy, or nuclear facilities, bombs, etc. Well, this is a nuclear reactor, power station in the middle of Wales near Festiniog. Okay, I will give you the actual precise location, but it's seen for 10 minutes by the local village bobby in the middle of nowhere. There's no ambient light. It's in the middle of nowhere, and suddenly over the lake, or just before the lake, and just to the right of the power station, he sees, with his wife, because he's in a police house, he's on duty, but he's like a bobby in the middle of nowhere, kind of police station. And his wife's there, he's on duty, but his wife is there, and they see this object, a classic saucer, seen for 10 minutes, low altitude, no noise, near to the power station. There is no other street light anywhere around whatsoever. And he said, if you'd have said to me beforehand that I would have now believe in UFOs as ET, he says, I would have laughed it in your face. He says, I was an arch skeptic. He said, but having seen this, we were in no doubt looking at this thing that this is from another place. Okay, so that's an interesting case. I'll show you a photograph of that. The second case, this is literally from June 2010. So it literally is the newest one I've got. And this has the potential to be an important case for the simple reason that it's backed up by a pretty good high quality camera phone, clips, 2 clips, and it's 2 off-duty police officers, man and wife, in County Durham. They don't want to go public because they're still serving, so I have to respect that. But they have given me permission to use the footage and the photographs however I want. So I am going to get the word out there, but I have to be careful that I don't paint a picture that shows them exactly where they are. Because if I said there's an on-duty couple and they live in this village, well, there won't be that many police officer couples in that village. So I'm just going to say it's County Durham, okay? Suffice to say that from those people that are down south, that's probably about 100 miles further up the coast from here, north. All right, nice area. Okay, but this is interesting because one of the common UFO types all over the years, and we'll talk from really the modern era, which is 47 onwards. That's the classic cut-off point. There was lots before, but the modern era when the subject really took off, and flying saucers, Kenneth Arnold, 1947. All right? So in that sort of 63 years now, from that time, we've got a lot of research data. And one of the common types is the cylindrical UFO, often akin to perhaps a mothership or whatever. But what they describe in clear daylight is a 200 to 400 feet long cylindrical object which they estimate to be about 30 feet wide, just moving around in clear blue sky, and they see it tumbling without falling, very slowly and rotating, and they capture it. We don't usually get many clips of things that are pretty sharp definition. Well, I'm hoping that this will be pretty sharp definition, because it impressed me. But anyway, we'll come to that in a second. All right, the first case. Beside the power station, it's hovering, it's silent, no sound, definite shape, saucer. Aided vision. Go get the binos, dear. What more do we want? They're looking at a solid object. 10 minutes duration. The next day, he went into the village, the nearest little village, and put the gentle word around. Did anybody see anything unusual yesterday? And he found two people, two elderly ladies, one of which refused point blank to say, oh, I'm not talking about that. And the second one basically said, yeah, I saw it, but I tried to get my husband interested, but he wouldn't come out. So there was some kind of corroboration there. But the point is, why should I disbelieve this man? This is 1982, so 28 years ago, and he's contacting me because he's come across me in my database. Now, if the database wasn't there, he wouldn't have had the ability to contact anyone. So, in a sense, the idea of the database was proven straight away because it gave officers an outlet, providing they could find me on the internet, etc., etc. There is no reason why any police officer should lie. Absolutely none at all. It doesn't make sense. Why were you telling me stories from 25, 30 years ago that you've not even told your wife? And the reason is simple, because it's something burned into them that they can't forget. I've often had police officers almost in tears when they've told me about an experience from 20, 30 years ago. For the simple reason is that they fear ridicule. And that's what media and governments have created, this fear of ridicule. And if there really was open congressional hearings, as what was often sought in America, you'd have people from coming out of the woodwork until your eyes couldn't see anymore. This is much more common than people realise, and I bet within all of you, the fact that you're in this room means that you're interested in the subject. And I bet you've had lots of little discussions with family members when you get them in a serious mode, or when you meet people and the subject may come up. And I bet you've heard lots of little stories. And I've had architects contact me, bankers, the occasional pilot has contacted me. You know, I can't go public with this. Hey, my career's finished if I do. And isn't it sad that society has created this climate that people who just see something extraordinary feel unable to come forward? And that is down to the media and government interference. Okay, so that's the guy, Brian Roberts, and this is the area where it was. It's not a great picture, I took it from a phone, but basically this is the, I'm going to try to say this in Welsh, Trosfynydd. Yeah, was that bad? Not bad? Trosfynydd. Right, anyway, that was my attempt. But basically what you can see there is he's pointing in the direction. So it's over a lake, and in the white building, which is now decommissioned, but in 1982 when he had his sighting, was an active nuclear power station. And he was the village bobby, and that's a mile away. And the object was to the right of that, just hovering there silently. Okay, so I think that's important, because I've looked at so many cases of UFOs being seen next to nuclear facilities. There's a definite interest in nuclear power, there's a definite interest in electricity. You know, around here there's Emily Moore, big TV mast. UFOs are drawn to large power sources of electricity. Don't know fully why, but they obviously get something from it. But there's simply too many good quality sightings over the years to say that these distinctions can't be made. Okay, the second case, 2 off-duty officers, daylight sighting, 200 to 400 feet long. So that's the key, daylight. 30-minute duration, no noise. And I've looked at these clips, and they're amazing. And I've sort of wanted to do a big publicity thing, and I thought, oh, I'll hang back until I get all my reports back, because you don't want to fall flat on your face and you've been fed the wrong stuff. But anyway, I have no reason to doubt that these clips are genuine. Okay, this is a still from the second case. So this is broad daylight. This is a 4 million pixel camera phone shot, and it looks cylindrical. That's an even sharper one, looks cylindrical. It's the dimensions that fascinate me, because they're saying that when they saw it, it was relatively close, and this is probably between 2,000 and 5,000 feet, and they estimate 200 to 400 feet long. Okay? We rarely get photographs that are sharp of cylindrical objects, but that's the blow-up. Now, I've never seen a cylindrical object yet, photograph-wise, that's got a sharper definition as that on a blow-up. Has anybody else? He said it was tumbling. He took about 8 photographs. Well, that shows a completely different angle. Tumbling, but not falling. No noise. What can do that? This is the actual video clip. See it turning on itself? And the light glinting? I might play that again. Watch the light. As it turns, hits the light, there may be some lights at the top that just go out. Can anybody else see possibly a couple of lights there? But if this is 200 to 400 feet long, look how slowly and precise that clip is. So I think that's quite an important clip, because we don't capture cylinders very often. Okay? This is the next clip. And you can see that its angle has changed. It's not stood up. And it's now there. What can do that in science? You've got the birds in the background. It's just a daylight clip of an object that they see for 30 minutes. And the photographs show it at various angles, at this, that and the other. But that first clip for me is really important because it's stood up almost. And it's rotated very slowly. Hits the light. Maybe some lights. Needs to have some research on it. But I think that's an impressive clip. And if they are anywhere near right in the proportions of a cylindrical object 200 to 400 feet long, then that, I think, it would then be a very important clip. The only thing that it lacks, and I said this to him, is it hasn't got a 3D perspective. It hasn't got a reference point. If it had had an horizon, a tree, we could have worked and calculated everything. And that's the only thing. But it's daylight. It clearly shows an object. And if the dimensions are anywhere near what they're saying, I think that is a major sighting. Daytime. We don't get many things like that. Okay. I'm now going to go quickly through some of the cases that I've dealt with. There are many, many. I've just done the 8th report. It was released for the first time in May for the Washington Expo conference there. And each year I do an annual report. It's the only way I can do it. I get sightings, I sort of throw them in the basket, research them, throw them in the basket. End of the year, oh, I've got to do my report, dig them out. It's the only way I can do it, over and above police work and a full-time role. Yeah? So I produce my annual report. Latest figures, well, the most important aspect is when I started I had 6 cases involving 12 officers. I now have 357 cases involving 800 British police officers. So literally 100 a year basically. So 8 years of research, 800 officers. There will be a tipping point where I've pretty much exhausted the historical ones. But I think that's an impressive figure. And the reason why it's impressive is because these are ordinary people with no axe to grind. In fact, it's pretty much the opposite. They've a lot to lose by stepping forward and saying, well, actually, I saw this. Because if they're on duty, they generally want anonymity. because they fear ridicule and a perceived risk to their career. And 2, the second case is that if their basic rule is that they're retired, they're generally happy to have their details released, and they've got the pension, so they basically say, well, up yours, I'm going to say whatever. Okay, that's a basic rule. And I have to respect either way, because for me, it's the collection of the cases that is important. And if they want anonymity, then why not? As long as I check them out and I'm happy who they are, then fine. I'll protect the source, much in the same way as the press would do. In fact, we would never move forward anyway if we didn't have that kind of confidentiality clause. Okay, some of the cases. And I say this before we look at the cases. If you followed this subject for a long time, which I've no doubt many of you will have done, there are many things that we can draw from 47 onwards. Okay? 63 years of research basically has shown that the most 4 common types are the disc, the sphere, the cigar and the triangle. But it's the flight characteristics that always are the best things for me. Because when you look for evidence, you look at flight characteristics. Oh, it's stealth, said the skeptic. Well, can stealth make a reversal in flight? Can the stealth make a right-angle turn? Can it make a vertical ascent, vertical descent, in instant acceleration, instant stop? No, it can't. It might not be seen on radar, and it might go very fast, but it's still a plane. We don't have yet the ability to do all of these things. So when we always look at sightings, we should always bear in mind the characteristics shown. And the characteristics after 63 years of research basically say the absence of sound, the ability to stop and hover, the ability to make right-angle turns, the ability to make reversals in flight, the ability to make instant acceleration and deceleration, and vertical ascent and descent. There is actually one more that I would add to that now, the ability to be invisible when they want to be. And there are several video clips where you seem to see objects that are there in broad daylight and then they're gone. And many of the police cases reported to me, a couple of which I shall mention during my presentation, are that they don't come left, they don't come right, they don't come from there, they just blink on and blink off. They're there 1 second, gone the next. So that really should be added. Okay, with a gulp, she's not here now, but she said 1901. The reason why I keep this one is it's an old newspaper clipping. It might not be anything, but I've included it because of the characteristics that it displays. It named 2 officers, Clark and Johnson. It's in Haworth, lovely village of Haworth in West Yorkshire, Bronte country. Cigar-shaped object. Think about these common characteristics that we now associate with the subject. No noise, low altitude. 1901. Well, could it have been an airship? Well, it could have been. But it had a green glow. How many airships had green glows? No noise. Well, the earliest airships, if there was any power attached to it at all, would be a propeller, and they made a lot of noise because they were little conventional little engines. It was very primitive stuff. But from my research, 1901, there's nothing flying in this country like that. So for me, it stands up as could be. So it's on there. Okay? I'm not saying that all the cases on the database are ET, but they are UFO sightings. By definition, it's an unknown object, and it's seen by police officers. So it should go on the database, unless I know otherwise that it's become identified, in which case I'll say it's identified. Okay, we talk about how many people are familiar with underwater UFOs. Quite a few of you, because I'm obviously talking to a knowledgeable audience. But for the general public, they won't have a clue. They just think flying saucers, that's it. But so many cases have been documented, certainly by military witnesses, of objects coming out of the sea, going into the sea. And this is a case, just a little newspaper report. 3 officers, Bristol Channel, see an object emerge from the water and fly away. Well, let's look at 1957. What can do that? Well, basically nothing. So it has to go down in this unknown category, unless the officers are mistaken. Okay, the Colin Perks sighting was one of the major sightings of the 1960s, and there is a 20-page plus file in the government archives, all right, about this sighting. even though it was a sole single witness sighting. And the reason why is because the guy was highly credible, uniformed us, that's him, and he saw this. And he's basically rattling a few doors, as policemen do on nights, checking that they're locked, and suddenly he becomes aware of an object. It's got a green glow. Green glow comes up a few times, actually. And he sees a classic saucer shape object, silent, hovering in the car park. And off it goes, fast speed. The reason why, whilst this case was very famous, it came to me from somebody that knew him and said, do you want to talk to him? Oh, yeah, please. So I talked to him. But the witness, when I did talk to him, what emerged that wasn't, people weren't aware of, is that when he'd gone in visibly shaken, this officer had been on the duty when he'd come in white-faced. He was ashen. He was absolutely scared witless out of it. And then they sent 2 police officers out who were coming, because he was just coming off nights. The 2 early turn officers at 6 o'clock went out to that car park, and they found like a glass-like powder, a layer of it. But what they didn't do was take samples. And this powder, which has often been described as angel hair or whatever, had dissipated by the time that they went back again. But I spoke to officers that said that that happened. This is an officer that came to me directly. This is a good one, because it's my just playing with a PowerPoint. I don't know how it shows up. Is it very dark, or can you actually make out that that's it's like a silhouetted over a road? Can you make that out? The white object silhouetted over a road? Can't really see it. But basically, they're driving in the Lulsgate area, which is near Bristol, a little airport, and basically they're driving along this rural road, middle of the night, and then suddenly the headlights go out. The car engine stalls. Have we ever heard that before in UFOs? Yes, we have, all the time, EM. All right? And then suddenly, as the lights have failed, the car's failed, there's 2 police officers in the car, suddenly, don't go left, don't go right, it goes 100 feet, well, 300-foot object, he described, 300 feet object, disc shape, hovering above the road. Total silence, a few hundred feet off the ground. 10 seconds, goes, engine comes back on, lights come back on. Ever heard that before? Yes. That guy had never even told his wife that story, and that's from 1966. But he told me. Why? What's his motivation? Because it happened, it's real. The William Waycott. Now, how many saw the John Searle thing last night? Quite a few of you. Well, when I was in Laughlin in February, they were promoting that documentary, and I unfortunately had to look after my big German Shepherd last night. There was nobody to look after him. But anyway, I didn't see the full documentary, but I've seen a section of it. It's a very good documentary. But what they tried to say to me about this case, about John Searle, is that he was responsible for the William Waycott sighting of a flying cross. And I said, well, what evidence can you show me that that was the case? And I haven't seen any convincing evidence that says it was, for the simple reason is that, and I'm not decrying John Searle's work at all, but I just look at it through the evidential eyes with regards to the William Waycott case. They chased a UFO that was originally seen low over hedges for 14 miles down country roads in Devon, up to speeds of 90 miles an hour. John Searle is trying to say that he had an aerial platform that he could do remote control over many miles. Well, I'm sorry, in 1967 I don't believe that. I don't think it was possible, even now with our expert remote control experts and gadgets that we live with now, that we could have 14 miles and an object whizzing along country roads. I don't think we can do it, okay? And the thing that finished it off for me that says it's not an explanation for that particular sighting was the fact that it's often missed, but that particular sighting was seen, at the end of it, there was a second flying cross, which to me rules out the Searle explanation, okay? Very important sighting. It caused a plethora of sightings in that area in Devon in 1967. It's a very famous sighting. And here is a clip coming up of the 2 police officers.
9 with PC Roger Willey and PC Clifford Waycott, based at Oakhampton, were out on night duty patrolling the A3072 Hatherley to Holsworthy Road. Precisely 1 minute past 4 o'clock this morning, they sighted an object 400 yards away from them and at tree-top level. They reported immediately to Oakhampton Police Station, where further men were brought out.
There was no question whatsoever that this was a figment of the imagination. It was definitely there. It was definitely either manned by some sort of being or remotely controlled. It was definitely being controlled to view our car or...
You had the feeling that it was watching you?
Definitely.
Yes.
So that's just a short segment, but what motivation have they for making up that kind of case? They haven't any. 1968, an off-duty case. This is one that came to me quite recently, but it's basically a silver sphere seen against a clear blue sky, but seen hovering in silence for 20 minutes. How often, when we look at UFO data and sightings, do we get that kind of sighting? A sphere, probably the most common object that's seen at the moment. No wind, no noise, disappears in the blink of an eye. What can do that? We can't do that. This is a good case because this is from 1969, officer directly to me. Basically, he's on patrol and he gets a radio message, keep an eye out for some unusual objects flying overhead. He'd heard all other officers on the radio hearing stuff, so he knew there was something going on. And sure enough, he sees that, a formation of 9 pearly white spheres in formation, an echelon formation. Next day, he's called in, as were some of the other outlying areas, police officers that witnessed this, and there were 6 witnesses, all seen individually by somebody from the military or from government. And they basically got told, don't talk about it. Why? There's nothing to this subject. Why? PC Robert Tomlinson, this is a good case, and this is the guy direct to me, not far from here, Normanton, in West Yorkshire. Basically, he sees a 100 feet high diamond-shaped object, 50 feet wide with a row of windows. And he's just driving along, 4 in the morning. He comes to what was a roundabout, and he sees this object just hovering there, low to the ground, literally from here to the back of that auditorium. Watches it for 5 minutes, and then it goes over towards Wakefield, which is about 15 miles away. When he gets back to the police station, he hadn't reported it. He's in shock. He debates whether to report it. When he gets back, somebody from the control room, and in those days every little police station had their own little control room rather than these big vast control rooms that you have now. And they said, I don't suppose you've seen anybody who's claims to have had a UFO sighting. And he went, why? Some milkman claimed to have seen this big diamond thing, nutter. And because it was phrased in that way, he didn't have the gumption, as it were, the courage to say, well, actually, I saw that too. And he just went stum. He went, no, I ain't seen it. When he contacted me, he said, I've lived with regret all of my life from then, because I should have backed up that milkman, because he wasn't mad, because I saw it too. And that's what happens. Burns into air. Fred Pullen, he worked at the docks, Salford docks, and basically he didn't know this at the time. It was later corroborated by a second officer, but he was on one part of the docks and he was watching a certain area, and suddenly he sees this sphere come towards him, stops, goes over an amenity block, stops, and off it goes. He debates whether to report it, and just as he's going back in at the end of his shift, when he meets up with other people that's been on different parts of the dock, one of his mates says, hey, did you see that thing? And that's when it came out. Total silence, hovering, displaying uncharacteristic flight characteristics. Yeah? We cannot do that. This ain't stealth. This ain't meteorological. This is structure. Okay? Again, local story come to me. Crofton, in the village where I lived until very recently. This guy's rattling doors, 3 in the morning. Little village, not far from here, about 18 miles away. And basically, he looks across to where a rural area, and he sees 3 green spheres. Can you see 3 green dots on that? Yeah. That's his perspective. I've done that a little bit of Photoshop. That's the actual view he had, and he sees these 3 spheres coming towards him, and he's watching. He's thinking, that's a plane, and he's going, that's a plane. That's not a plane. And then it does a right angle turn and goes. Choo! How many green spheres do that? I don't. Very famous sighting from 1978. A very famous investigator who was a police officer, sergeant for many years. He then became a top investigator for Quest, which was the forerunner of UFO magazine. Tony Dodd went all over the world, much respected. Sadly passed away last year, or 2 years ago now, maybe. But sadly passed away. But basically his sighting from 1978, corroborated with another officer, Alan Dale, is basically they're in a police car, rural location, North Yorkshire, and they see an object, that's an artist's impression, and it flies right over the police car. Probably not much higher than this roof from where I am. Can they be mistaken? Is that meteorological? Is that stealth? No, I don't think so. And that's where his interest stemmed, and it became a lifelong passion. This is one of my favourite sightings. I often quote it, but it's the sheer logistics of this that I like. Long Crendon, which is in Thames Valley area. 3 officers, 2 police vehicles, 3 officers, cigarette time, parked up, chinwag. That's what police officers do in the middle of the night. Rural location, no street lights anywhere at all. This is the guy, and basically they see a flash low to the horizon in the distance, long way off, maybe a second or 2. What was that? Don't know. Gone off. Forget about it. But 5 minutes later, suddenly, they see an object the width of a football field, shining a beam down across the landscape the width of a football field, 500 feet high, less than 500 metres away, in a rural location. That's extremely close, okay? Shining a beam down, across the landscape. It didn't come left or right, it didn't come down from the sky, it just blurred. And the smaller objects, akin to the mothership, smaller objects, little discs flying around this larger object. They watch it in total silence for 5 minutes, and then gone. Didn't go left, didn't go right, didn't go up. Just what? So invisibility is there, no noise. Debated whether to report it. They all thought they'd be ridiculed as mad, so they didn't. Alan Godfrey case, it's a very famous case. I could spend an hour and a half just talking about the Alan Godfrey case. It's one of the most famous cases, not just because it's a sighting, but really the Alan Godfrey case is Britain's first abduction case. And I have done lectures on it separately. Suffice to say that he has a sighting of an object in the middle of the road in Todmorden that then disappears. He has a period of missing time, which he didn't realise at the time, which later transpires that when under hypnosis, his early abduction case, in March 1981, it emerges that he was taken on board an object, he was examined, there were small creatures. He didn't call them greys, he called them lamp heads, bulb heads, little 3 to 4 feet objects that were putting things on his legs. But this is an important case because in Britain it predates virtually everything else. Yeah? Other than some of the classic American and South American cases, Barney and Betty Hill, etc., etc. Very important case. The important thing about his sighting was that there was a school caretaker that saw it 5 minutes before, going in the same direction, and there were 3 officers up on the moors an hour before looking for stolen motorbikes, last seen heading in the direction of where Alan later had his sighting. And later on there was 2 other traffic officers. A year later, 2 traffic officers contacted him and said, look, we saw this, but we've seen all the grief you've had in the press, we ain't coming forward. So in the end there were 5 police officers and a school caretaker that said that something very strange was flying in that area that night. Very important case. That's the guy, and that's what he saw. 14 feet by 20 feet. I'm going to skip some because this is a helicopter case. I'll just basically mention it. This is in the metropolitan area. It's not the pilot who came to me, it was one of the flight crew that came to me. Not a police officer, but he was in a police helicopter. He's told me this story and I have no reason to disbelieve him, but it was a police spotter, basically. And they're in the heart of London when they see this object, and it flies around them really close, and it's only 3 to 4 feet, and it's whizzing around them, and they don't know what the hell it is, and it then goes down to the ground, and then it's up there. And anyway, can you imagine, when you see the report that he sent me, he says air channels were all changed, the helicopter routes, the flight paths were all changed, and it was affected. We haven't got an accurate date for this, but this is a very interesting case, and there are several that's emerged over the last few years of police helicopters being seen near UFOs, and that is an area where I could go down a lot of research at some point if I had the time. Okay, we talk about green spheres. This is an off-duty special, just about to go on duty with another special. They're driving along a dual carriageway, 2-lane highway, and guess what? They're just about to go on for 10 o'clock at night, and they're on the inside lane, and guess what overtakes them? A green sphere. Can you imagine? Size of a car, overtakes them, and then does a right and veers off over the landscape. And this is this guy. And he was still pretty shook up about that. I'm not surprised really, but you know, when we talk about unconventional objects, can you imagine that you're just driving along in a green sphere the size of a car just pulls alongside of you? The interesting thing there, I tried to talk to his mate, and his mate has gone into denial, which often happens with very traumatic UFO cases. Some people daren't go back and revisit it. So, but they don't say it didn't happen, but they just go, I don't want to talk about it. When somebody says to you, I don't want to talk about it, don't say it's not happened. It just means that they don't want to talk about it because it's too painful or takes them into areas that they're not comfortable with. This is a good one. Very similar. 2 traffic officers, middle of the night, parked up on the motorway, and over the other side of the motorway, a missile-shaped object, 30 feet long, just overtakes them. Low to the ground, about 30 feet off the ground, about 30 feet long. As you do. As you do. No reason to lie, corroborated by the other officer. All right? 15 minutes. Okay. When we talk about numbers of officers involved in sightings, this is important, Nick is very familiar with this case from 1993, 31st of March 93, and it is the biggest single number of officers involved, and we're literally talking from 14 or 15 geographical positions over the southwest up to now 24 officers. It was at 20, but during the course of last year 4 other officers came to me, so it's now 24, and they were in different locations that had already been reported, so I've added them. 24 officers from multiple locations seeing this object, and that was subject of a documentary, very good documentary with Nick Pope, and I believe that's a very important case. Okay, this is I include this very quickly just to say that this is how the MOD, again going Nick's way here, right, the MOD, a lot of the papers that are released contain some good stuff, much of it is mundane correspondence, but you do get some really good nuggets in there, and for me some of the nuggets are really what I would call the loose minutes. I'm sure Nick will be thinking, oh God, what's he going to say? But in the loose minutes, which are from civil servants to civil servants, basically, what we're going to do about this, you get things like, we will adopt this defensive press line and things like that. They often tell you about the way government was thinking at the time. All right, but this case is good because it comes in and it's a helicopter sighting. So we have a sighting by a helicopter crew that takes place on the 17th, I think, of November. So it's reported there, credible witness report. Okay. Less than a day later, even though it's a credible witness report and a crew, the response is, therefore, I can now confirm that the incident does not represent anything of defence interest. Within a day, somebody's saying, no matter what it is. Could have World War III, but it's of no defence significance whatsoever. Nothing that happens in our airspace, short of an alien shooting down a Boeing 707 kind of thing, is of defence significance. That's basically the MOD line. And it is ludicrous, it's untenable, it's an absolute joke. It does not stand up to scrutiny. And that just shows you how somebody wants to dumb down this subject. Credible sighting report, 'cause it's been written up as that. Police crew, multiple witnesses. No. It's nothing of defence significance. And I interpret that is because that object did not threaten the helicopter. I think that's why it's of no defence significance. But you should turn that on its head and say, what the hell is it flying in our airspace? Has to be of defence significance. This is a famous one. I'm going to just quickly say that 12 officers, summer solstice, 1987, uniformed officers, and then suddenly, middle of the night, they look up and see an object that's doing this. You know, a castle wall? Right angle turn, right angle turn, right angle turn. Well, I'm sorry, stealth don't do that. Good UFO story. Okay, RUC officer with his wife. This is from last year. Basically, he sees an object just hovering there. He gets out of his car. He's actually got his pistol with him. Because in 1999, the RUC, Royal Constabulary, were all live armed. And he actually thought, do I get my gun out? He left his wife in the car and he walks underneath this thing. Can you imagine how surreal that experience would be? I had a brilliant one with a crop circle. I nearly got really excited because it was 2 officers that apparently saw a crop circle being made or saw a sighting of 2 objects in an elevated position, and then as the sun came up, below the 2 lights was a crop circle formed. What a great case that would have been, wouldn't it, to have that correlation between police officers, crop circles, yeah? The officer wouldn't come forward, the sergeant. He was reported second-hand by one of his men, one of his staff, who was a police officer, who contacted me. He says, look, this guy is as straight as a die. He's told me this story, but he won't come forward. And I tried to get hold of this officer. So it's the one that got away. But because I'm convinced by this officer's account, and it was said to him directly, it's a hearsay account in the end, but I've included it. This case, you may have seen this. This is from a traffic car facing forward camera. It's not the light that you can see. Just as we go around the corner, we're going to see an object coming up just after this next tree on your right hand side. There you see it, up on the hillside. Traffic car begins to think, what the hell is that? Speed starts to reduce. What's that, what's that, what's that? Speed slowing. You see it's there. This has been analysed by the US History Channel for the UFO Hunters series, and Jack Kasher, physicist, says this is not astronomical, unknown object. And it sort of blinks out and disappears. The actual officer themselves, the actual officer who supplied this, didn't come to me, it went to Peter Davenport in America. But basically, he said that it was a cluster of white lights that he saw. The video doesn't show the quality. Okay, conclusions with 8 minutes to go. From the police point of view, almost 3/4 of the sightings on the database offer multiple police officer corroboration. 73% now. It's come down from 75%. 73% multiple police officers. That's more than one officer. That's a high percentage, isn't it? When we look at 357 cases, that's a lot. Multiple officer cases. I only think I've scratched the tip of an iceberg. And I think we could have one for pilots, we could have one for radar operators. We should have... Prufos can be replicated anyway. Preferably better if you're a serving officer, because I think it will attract more credibility. There is now an Australian site that's looking for Australian officers and doing a very good job. In terms of police officers, I think that probably a good 50% of the cases that I've got point towards an unknown explanation. You remember what I said about the sliding scale? I think if it was pilots and the kind of sightings that they have, it's probably 80%. Well, I think police officers probably at the 50%. Yeah? Significantly higher than the 5% that people go on about in the media. Last report, 56 cases, 93 officers, 357 cases, 800 officers. Another batch of files released last week. No doubt I'll find some more. Future, having written to all the 38, well, there was actually 43 forces, but I only wrote to 38 because I forgot I didn't have enough stamps. And since I got disciplined, I thought, well, I best not write to the other 5. But basically, 2 of those forces have now adopted me as an unofficial single point of contact. So they now, civilian rings up Suffolk Police, which is good for Rendlesham because that's in Suffolk, and also Humberside Police. If anybody rings them up, their control rooms direct them to me. That's good, isn't it? So that's something that's important. And I've got a few civilian reports coming my way now. I endeavour to write a book next year. I'm not looking at Richard for any reason, but I want to write a book. I've got enough material, but it will take a year for me to do over and above. But I think that book should be out there. There's never been a book devoted to police officers. I cannot find a normal mainstream publisher anywhere. I just won't go near it. Don't know why. I've been invited to write a column for the new UFO Matrix magazine, which should kick in probably issue 3 or 4. Okay, best evidence. I don't believe we deal with evidence very well as a UFO community as a whole. We should have a single place. I think we should have a bank of information where all the best research goes to one place, and then we say to the press, take it to the bank. And that's the place where all our thorough documented cases go. One place. Let's cut the crap, get all our best stuff together, so when somebody says what evidence is it, we say take it to the bank. It's just a little idea. We're very fragmented in the way we deal with evidence in this subject. We need to get our act together. Okay? Rendlesham Forest. I have got 4 minutes. Is that right? 4 minutes. Right. The collaboration with Holt continues. It's slowing because I'm doing the hard part is sort of done. I'm about to embark on another rewrite. I've had some changes in my personal life over the last 6 months, so it's not really been possible to write as such. You have to be in the right frame of mind to write well. I'm now in a better place, so I will be able to do that now. So in the next couple of months, a rewrite will take place, and the rewrite is at the behest of a Hollywood producer who has read the initial script that I've given him. He's called Paul Davids. He made the original Roswell film. Okay? So he's a genuine guy. He's a genuine Hollywood producer. His wife is a vice president of a Hollywood firm. And basically he has said to me that George Lucas, Spielberg have looked at Rendlesham, but it's a fragmented piece, conflicting stories. And he says, how do we pull it all together? If you can come up with a script that pulls it all together in a cohesive way, he says, I will take this around Hollywood for you. He gave me some ideas, hence why there's a rewrite going. He basically said, I don't like the first half, but the second half I loved. So we're in the ballpark. Still a massive hurdle, but we're in the ballpark. He is interested. I saw him 3 times in Laughlin, so he's interested enough to seek me out 3 times. If I can get the rewrite done, hopefully by the end of October that'll go to him and we'll see where we go from there. I'm determined that this should be a film because I think it's the best story that we've ever got in terms of the number of military witnesses. There was physical evidence on the ground, background radiation, there was heat sources coming off trees in the landing pod areas. I'm sure how many are not familiar with Rendlesham Forest? Oh, good. So I don't need to go on. Oh, one in the audience. I'll give you a private hour. Okay, sorry. But basically, it's a very important case. It has all the elements that should be made into a film. What we've tried to do is take it away from sensationalism, which is what Hollywood does. That is very hard to battle against because I think if you ever got to the stage of submitting the script and say, yeah, we'll have that, okay, we'll buy that, as it were. Then after that, they tend to bastardise it afterwards. But I'm trying to do it in a way that says I'm not going to do that. So we're in the ballpark. We're probably at 3% chance of getting this made into a film at the moment. But that's better than the 1% last year. So we're getting there. I'm not going to lead you false hopes. We're getting there. Okay, in wrapping up, UFOs to me are a passion. It's a very real subject. I only wish that this auditorium was full of 550 people. I'm not trying to reach the people that are in this room because you're already here because you've got an interest. What I would like to do is get out there and reach people off the street. I have tried to get a TV series in development. It's been on the proposal now for the last 18 months with a company called Steadfast TV, who are London based. They basically love the idea of me doing an evidential series, the best evidence of UFOs in Britain, the history in Britain. And I would write it and present it. We can have cookery experts doing cookery programs. We can have antique experts doing antique programs. Why not have a UFO expert doing a UFO program? And let's do it, know what the evidence is. And if I don't know what evidence is, I should be shot. Yeah? So it's trying to break through that mainstream media, and there is such a media downplay to this subject. Very, very difficult to do. But you've been a wonderful audience this morning. Thank you for your time, and I hope you've enjoyed it.